Hey, everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, interrupting our Big Ten previews with some breaking news about the commitment of four-star power forward Julius Avent from New Jersey to Michigan State. Before we begin, a huge thank you to Ben Vanderveen for his very generous support of the show via PayPal, and from Andy Schmidt as a new Scott Skiles supporter on Patreon. Go Green, guys. Thanks so much. If you like what we're doing, appreciate the content, and want to support the show, head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support. There you can find ways to support the show via one-time links on PayPal or Venmo, or through a monthly basis, recurring basis on Patreon or Substack. I don't know about you. This is the endless summer. We've kind of had this extra couple weeks. I don't know how you feel about that. I just have a feeling at this point we're going to go straight to winter. It's going to be like 30 degrees after like an 80-degree day here in October. But but let's get going and talk about Julius Avent. Second high school commit for Michigan State following the commitment of Carlos Medlock earlier.
Yeah, big get. They're all big at this point. And this was one that it was a funny thing because you had the sense from the point Michigan State offered him, which I believe came in, was either May or June. It was right after they made two offers right after the NBA PA Top 100 camp. It was Quinn Costello, who ended up signing with Michigan, and this guy, Julius Avent. And the sense you had from that point forward is that Michigan State was in great shape with him, doing a great job. But there was a big but there. His dad, Anthony Avent, who was a 6-year NBA player and was one of the more importantly for our purposes, was one of the all-time greats at Seton Hall. Mm-hmm. And he's also a Jersey kid. So it's not like, well, his dad played there, but he didn't grow up in the state. You know, right. All the signs were there. And there was a lot of talk to that effect that, yeah, Michigan State's in great shape, but boy, Seton Hall is going to be hard to beat because of that. And in fact, he did schedule a bunch of visits, the last of which was going to be Seton Hall. And the MSU visit, which was actually the first official they had this recruiting season, that came and went, by all accounts, went extremely well. But you kept hearing the same thing, even as recently as earlier this week. Yeah. And what I've concluded, and sometimes this is the case, and it's hard for us to know. I've probably talked about this here before. I know I have on Jim Comparoni's board. A lot of people love the expanding net of Michigan State's recruiting, right? Uh-huh. And I do too, because you want the best players you can get. And if that's what it's going to take to get them, then so be it. But one of the negatives is for someone like me, and frankly, for Michigan State recruiting coverage in general, the further afield it goes, the less of a good feel you have for where recruitments are.
From a sources standpoint, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can have sources within the Michigan State operation, and that's great. But I can tell you over the years, generally speaking, Michigan State, the coaching staff and the operation in general is pretty optimistic in terms of how they approach things. So what made it easier to get good reads on things back in the old days is that you had people who weren't directly affiliated with Michigan State in the state, high school sources, AAU guys, just people in the basketball world. And you don't have that with any of these recruitments. You know, Carlos Medlock was that way, but that happened so fast that it didn't really come to bear. The rest of these guys. So the reason I'm raising this is my conclusion that I've reached as now that this has all unfolded is that the talk about Seton Hall being a major threat and probably the perceived leader and all of that, I'm going to think that was actually maybe some wishful thinking on the part of Seton Hall people, because there were Seton Hall coverage as recently as Monday afternoon that was stating that, oh, he's decisively heading to Seton Hall, and Michigan State actually has a higher priority on their board, which would be Maximo Adams. Well, those guys can play together. That's not the case, but it was within an hour or two of that word started circulating that he's going to commit to Michigan State. So that's the conclusion that I've reached. But again, it would be hard to know that when you don't know how reliable people in New Jersey are. It's just
Sure.
not. It's just not the
Well,
same thing.
especially if you're a
So
national person, right? And you have no real ties to either program. And when you have these larger national recruitments and you don't have, it's just different, right? Than having someone
yeah,
on the
I've
really
never.
tied to one team who has a good feel for the staff or whatever.
Absolutely true. And, I've always, for years and years and years and years, said with a lot of justification, don't ever believe a national guy over people that are actually dialed in here. When it came to kids in this area,
Right.
Michigan,
Yeah.
Ohio, Indiana, don't ever buy that.
Hmm.
They're just not going to have as strong a level of contact. And I can't count how many times that came to pass. One of my favorites was the Miles Bridges recruitment, where you had people insisting it was going to be Kentucky all along. Nope, nope. I knew better. And anyway, um, so getting back to Julius Avent, so the recruitment again, he had 5 visits scheduled. He ended up took the visit to Michigan State, and he did take a visit to Xavier. He ended up canceling visits to Providence and Penn State, and then today, the day we're recording this, or I'm sorry, tomorrow, Thursday, he was supposed to take a visit to Seton Hall, and he canceled that and instead announced his commitment on Wednesday. That
I mean,
was
that
the sign.
telegraphs it, right? I mean, yeah, exactly. At that
Absolutely.
point, you kind of know where it's going.
And it's what
You could,
and it's
yeah,
what tells me that the Seton Hall talk probably, when you look back at this, maybe I'm not saying it was ridiculous, obviously not, but clearly they were not. It just wasn't the way that some people felt that it was. That seems
right.
clear. He wanted to play at a high level. Now, I heard that the visit to Michigan State went extremely well. He took it with his parents, and the feeling was that um, it was a great fit, the player and the family, which is important.
Hmm.
And so they've gotten it done, and that's a second top 100 player. Julius Avent, generally in the back 50 nationally, somewhere in the 70-ish kind of range,
Sure.
but a guy that they really, really like. And he's the type of player that, frankly, Michigan State's had a lot of success with. And so what do I mean by that? What type of player is he? Well, I think he's primarily, with the way the game has evolved now, you'd say primarily he's a 4-man at 6'8"
Hmm.
and about 220 currently. The frame looks like he could add some good weight. Wouldn't surprise me to see him get up into the 230, 235-ish range. His dad was a power forward. He was a little bit taller. He was actually like 6'9". But yet he has the athletic ability and the ball skills that he could play some wing. And there are a lot of guys. I mean, we can go on and on and on. We know Raybar Morgan, Malik Hall, um, BJ Dawson, although offensively he wasn't as versatile as this guy is. Lots of examples. In fact, two guys on the current team, Cohen Carr and Cam Ward, fit that
Sure.
mode. So
Hmm.
it's a very familiar mode. I would say that the book on Julius at this point is he's probably a little better inside the paint than on the perimeter, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a perimeter game. So to put some meat on that particular bone, in EYBL play this year, he played for PSA Cardinals. Overall, he shot 32% from 3. But in their 5 games in Peach Jam, he shot 38%, and 47% overall. So, and that was a 5-game sample at Peach Jam, so it wasn't one
Okay.
game.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but I think it shows you, and he also in the Peach Jam event, which ended the AAU season, he also averaged 18 points and 5 boards a game. So there's a lot to work with here, and we're seeing lots of examples. Those of you who watch the Michigan State basketball account, I'm sure, have all been enthused to see the video of Carson Cooper hitting a trail 3 that looked about as comfortable as you're ever going to see it from a 6'11" guy.
Yeah,
Um,
we were warned about that by
point
Borovich
point
earlier this
being
summer.
here, point being, Michigan State, generally speaking, guys make progress as shooters.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so a guy like Avent coming in and shooting at the level he already is, I would think it's a safe bet that he is going to be a guy, if not immediately, then in fairly short order, I think will be enough of a perimeter threat that he'll truly be a stretch guy. Teams will have to honor him, defend him on the arc. And that's a big deal. But the things they really like about him, from what I understand, is his toughness, his defense. He's got, not only is he a guy who can handle banging inside and play physically on defense, but he's versatile, which is really important at Michigan State, that you have the ability to
Mhm.
switch and not get exposed. And they think he's got that. They just like his attitude. It's something that gets used all the time. We talk about it all the time, Spartan dog. But the sense is Julius Avent is that kind of guy. And that's why they were so steadfast in their recruiting of him. They've taken multiple trips this fall,
Last 2 weeks.
even
Yeah.
out, at least two, out to that area to see Josiah Jervis, who is another player they're extremely high on, who's more of a wing from New York, and also Julius Avent. And I think the reason why is that they felt, besides his obvious talent and physical tools, that mentality wise, he was a fit for what Michigan State wants out of their players. And I mentioned earlier he had a big NBA PA Top 100 camp, which is, Michigan State had been recruiting him for about a year, but they hadn't offered. They offered after that camp. A bunch of other high majors did as well. That's when his recruitment really took off.
Mhm.
But I think he also won one other thing worth mentioning. He won a private school state title at Bergen Catholic in northern New Jersey last year. So, we talked about that with Cam Ward and Jordan Scott. Uh, the value of adding guys who know how to win.
Sure.
And Julius Avent would be another example of that. Uh, Other interesting things, as I mentioned, bloodlines. His father, Anthony, as I said earlier, an all-time Seton Hall great. He was actually on that Seton Hall team that unfortunately lost to Michigan in the 1989 title game.
Oh,
He
that's
was a
Ramil
reserve.
Robinson
He
year, yeah.
averaged 10 minutes a game on that team, but he did play. And then the next 2 years, he was a starter and major impact guy. He was the 15th guy taken in the 1991 draft, which is the same draft that Steve Smith went in the top
Okay.
5, I believe, by the Atlanta Hawks. Played 6 years in the NBA. So the bloodlines are there. And Michigan State, it's funny. It wasn't a feature of the program for a long, long time. But recently we've had a couple guys that have those NBA bloodlines. Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, was the
Right.
first. And that was a big one because his dad, it's like this. His dad didn't have a connection to Michigan State.
Well, that's
Obviously,
just
last
it
year,
too, right? Yeah, we're not talking about people who have, a long,
right.
like
Chase
Richardson
Richardson
is
was
different,
different.
right? Yeah.
Right. But, you look at those two guys. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jace Richardson. Now, I'm not sure that Julius Avent is going to be one and done the way those two guys were. Although it's funny, neither one of them was necessarily seen as likely to be that when their freshman season started. Not even Jaren. I
Right.
think
It's
that
certainly
was
not Jace. Yeah.
yeah, definitely not Jace. So maybe Julius Avent will surprise us. But I think the point is that Michigan State now, you can say, is starting to get some traction in that way. It's like people that come from, real basketball families, like guys who played professionally. And obviously, for anybody like that, I'm sure somewhere near the top of Anthony Avent's list of things he is concerned about in this process for his son would be the obvious, which is one that people talk about all the time, but it's true. It's how well is this program going to prepare my son for the next level? You
Right.
know, it's not just even about what's he going to do at Michigan State, although that's important. It's are they going to put him in a position to fulfill his dreams? And I think that increasingly it seems the answer is yes. And this would be another example. And again, one where Michigan State did not have an obvious leg up and they just won the family over in addition to the
Yeah.
player. So I think that's something worth thinking about and worth mentioning here in this recruitment as well. That obviously proved to be important in some fashion. We have not, as of yet, heard an interview from either from Julius, or I don't know that his dad will talk to anybody yet, but
Right.
so we don't know for sure how big a role that played, but I have to think it's in there somewhere. That would
Yeah.
be my gut instinct is that that would be a factor in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we could talk to him a minute after they'll ask him what brought him to Michigan State, and it'll be the family atmosphere, the fact that everyone's really tied together. That's the
Yep.
same thing we've heard from every single recruit we've talked to in the last 3
Yeah.
years. I guess we've talked to just about
Yeah.
everybody, and they say the same thing, which is, yeah, I mean, that's, a culture that Izzo has obviously developed over the years, and it's become more evident, I guess, with the grind week and these sorts of things, with the reunions
Yeah.
of players, and even players who had left the team or been dismissed even, and they come back and they
Yep.
sort of are still part of the
That's right.
family. And so, a real family, even the black sheep kind of show up. Right. And so, so that's been a kind of a neat thing by Michigan State. And which reminds me of some great people you want to have in your family, of people taking care of you. And that's the Brothers Just Gutters. It is fall. The leaves are eventually going to fall. I don't know what it's like in Detroit, but here in Grand Rapids, we've had some leaves fall, but it's
Not much.
not a lot,
It's
right?
been
For
it's
October,
been
it's kind of crazy.
70s pretty consistently, and it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon.
I tell you, it's going to just suddenly be 30 degrees and snowing. I just know
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. So you want to make sure you take care of that stuff now. Contact the Brothers Just Gutters. They can make sure your gutters are operational, and they can also put the leaf guards on, clean them out right now, or have them just clean out in a week or two, but get on the schedule so that they're out there to take care of it. So you don't have to get on the ladder and do it. You get 10%
I
off.
I
Listen to the
will
show.
I will
Go ahead.
note, I actually was out walking my dog in my neighborhood the other day, and I saw a Brothers Who Just Do Gutters truck in my neighborhood. So definitely in Southeast Michigan, they are down here. They did a great job on my previous home, and yeah, they're the guys to call.
Well, you might find out you might have some problems later. So you have to see. Sometimes
That's
those are the
right.
kind of things that don't show up sometimes right away. Yeah, they took care of our house, did a fantastic job as well. And I know people flagged them down. They do great work. So contact them right away. Also, good time to get the house washed, get a good power wash your house or your windows clean. The Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids, if you're in the greater Grand Rapids area, that's a great place to do it. They have great pricing. They're very professional. They get it done in a hurry. And again, they'll get on the ladder so you don't have to. Stay safe. Just stay on the ground. Stay terrestrial bound. It's always much safer. You can get a hold of either of those businesses at our support page at tffinots.com/support. You can find Troy and his team in the greater Grand Rapids area. And for the Brothers Just Gutters, you can find Craig or Kurt or Greg, whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state. Remember, mention Final Four to either of them. For the Brothers, you get 10% off. For Squeegee Squad, you get 15% off that estimate. And finally, head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. They have our gear at tffinots.com. You can find it at on their friends and family page, or friends and supporters page. And then you can also get anything else at Nudge Printing. Fantastic gear, great apparel. It's always my favorite in our family. And 20% off, you just type in Final Four at checkout. I think, one thing to note about this recruitment, and I'm pretty sure it's Avent, this is the one where Tom Izzo had that picture, I think it was on Instagram, where he's like going crazy and screaming and stuff, holding basketball. Am I right? Is it?
No,
Oh,
no,
was that Jervis?
that is Jervis.
Jervis. So that's the next one. So it's not Avent. So yeah, I do think I agree with you though, that it's very interesting that with this recruitment, much like Richardson, but certainly like you said with Jackson, you are starting to see it's, this is what happens when you've had a good reputation, and you certainly have people who are advocates for you outside in the world too. Like Tom Izzo, not only is he having, not only he's been successful coaching, he's got a national championship, bunch of Big Ten tournament championships, but he's developed so many players and made so many pros, especially people who weren't expecting to be pros, or I guess most players expect to be at some point, but most other people weren't expecting these to be the big pros. And he's been able to cultivate that And then those players, of course, go in and they talk to people. And so anyway, it's not surprising that the children of those players they may have played with or been around will then are, encouraged to have their son, hey, just check it out and see what you think about the place. And I think, you're seeing that right now. I mean, especially in a time when, fortunately for Michigan State, with the paucity of good basketball players in the state of Michigan, it's nice that you're getting, you can spread the net a lot easier than they probably could have in the past. And maybe also just with the NIL situation too.
Yeah, there's an interesting element with this. Paul Conondike over at Spartan Mag mentioned this. Maybe it was over the weekend or earlier this week. And I think this is less relevant to this recruitment in particular, but I do think it's a point that applies across the board when you're talking about Michigan State recruiting high school guys. He said that there's I'll borrow a term from the political arena. You may remember strange new respect, which used to be like media deciding that all of a sudden someone who had been a Republican was okay because they criticized Republicans, right? And they had strange new respect for them. Well, in any event, he said that he's hearing positive stuff about Tom Izzo that he from certain quarters that he's never really heard it from before. And so that means in this area, we're not talking about guys in New Jersey, what have you. I actually think in a lot of ways, Michigan State's brand, it's probably easier in some ways in these areas because all somebody who's in the basketball world in New Jersey thinks about Tom Izzo is that the guy wins all the goddamn time and puts guys in the NBA, and that's kind of it. But in Michigan, and obviously we know Michigan State has done tremendously well recruiting Michigan. I'm not pretending they haven't, but there have been several recruitments over the years that they didn't win. They didn't get a guy they wanted. And oftentimes it was this weird, doesn't let you get your boogie on, all this kind of nonsense. According to Conondike, what he's heard recently is that this respect for Michigan State, for some of these people who didn't seem to have it in the past, is largely down to the fact that they are still willing and able to work with and develop high school players.
Right.
And if your business, if your world is coaching high school, guys in AAU, they're like, that's your concern. In other words, you're not an agent, so you're not out there taking on whoever's in the portal. Your concern is getting high school guys into good situations. All of a sudden, there's a look at Michigan State in maybe a little bit of a different light.
Sure.
And I do think that now he's talking specifically this area. Now, then the question becomes, well, how many guys from the state are worthy of playing at Michigan State or capable of playing at Michigan State at the level you want? That remains to be seen. I mean, it's definitely proven tough to see many guys recently who have been at that level. So we'll see what difference that makes, if any. But I will say this. I do think that it does matter in all of these recruitments that they're involved in right now. And they're involved in a bunch. I mean, they've still got, let me think about this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. So 2 commits, 5 more guys who either have already visited or slated to take a visit. As we're recording this, 2 more guys, Carlos Medlock, who's obviously already committed, and Ethan Taylor, a top 30 center, one of the best centers in the country, 7-footer basically, who is going to be Carlos Medlock's teammate at Link Academy in Missouri. That's a big recruitment to watch.
Yeah.
They're going to be in this weekend. And then I believe they've got one more visit left with a Canadian big man, Max Meyer, is the last one slated. But, it has to be having an impact.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think when you look at,
Jaden
Yeah.
Collingwood is the other
Yeah.
guy who will be visiting unless there were to be another commitment. I think if Maximo Adams were to commit before that visit, maybe he doesn't visit. But in any event, you see that Michigan State is serious. I mean, the default is always to assume, well, no major program takes more than like, 3 guys max.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
pretty sure Michigan State's going to end up with at least 4, and I think there's a decent chance it's 5.
well, it comes down to your strategy, whether you want to dip into the portal. Like if
Yeah.
you say, if you get Taylor as a big man, you got McCullough, we'll see what he is this year. We'll know. So a couple things. One is I think there's not 100% certainty who it has to leave with the eligibility changes. So that is just kind of, we'll leave that way in the back of your mind that there may
Yep.
everybody make it 5 years. Who knows, right?
Yep.
It's everyone just
Yeah.
assumes people are going to be gone. So we're not going to talk about that,
right.
but that's out there.
Yep.
But then, if McCullough looks really good, you say, well, maybe we bring in a freshman who we think can play right away, who's maybe, got some strength and stuff. Maybe you don't have to go the portal. I mean, I don't know. And so then you could make an argument that you could take 5 and you don't need to go dip in the portal and get another big man. If you've got other size, like you may have a Cam Ward who you say, that guy can play the 5 if you have to for some minutes or something like that. And then suddenly you're not as short maybe in the front court as you may think.
Yes. And I think what has to resonate with a lot of these guys is the track record,
Oh,
So
yeah,
you
for
look,
sure.
you
Yeah.
look at the likely starting lineup for Michigan State on game 1 is going to include at a minimum 4 guys who were all recruited as freshmen to Michigan State.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
they're winning. It's
and
not
the
just
5th
like
one is
bums.
up in the air. I think we've been feeling like Trey Fort was the very, very likely guy, but what you hear Izzo saying, particularly on the defensive end, I don't rule out Kurtang being the
I
5th
think that's gonna be an
starter,
up in the air
especially
position.
early.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
which could
Maybe all
mean it's
season.
all 5 guys. So,
Sure. Yeah.
that's the thing. I think that that has to be resonating. And so if you are one of these guys, if you're obviously the 2 guys have already committed, or you're Josiah Jervis, or you're Maximo Adams, or you're Ethan Taylor, or the Reed kid, or Meyer, or Collingwood, any of these guys that have either already visited or about to, well, it's real. You see it. You see the evidence of it.
It's not just
Tom
talk.
Izzo isn't going to roll into November with 4 guys starting whom he grabbed out of the portal. Now you could say, well, maybe that it works to his detriment over time. That we'll see. But I think if you're interested in getting higher end high school talent, then that's got to mean something to you.
I think so too. And I think, the reputation that Izzo has, for good or ill, and I think in this time it's maybe to his benefit, is that he's seen as sort of not behind the times, but maybe a little bit like old fashioned, and he leans into it because he just is who he is, right? That's fine. But I think that in this sense, it really is going to help. It helps him because he's seen as someone who's developing players. I'm sure if you talk to most coaches, they'd much rather have a system where they're bringing in guys who can develop them, build them a culture, and expect to hang out. But most places, they just can't they can't anticipate hanging on to players for 3 or 4 years. They don't have the track record. Like Underwood,
right.
I'm sure he's a guy he'd rather have it. And I'm sure this is what Dusty May wants. And but I think the fact that Izzo has done it, and then he has a national reputation, and he has a reputation right now as a guy who's like bucking the trend, and he's pushing against the way the world is now with the transfer portal. It's going to give him higher. He's going to look better to people who are in favor of development, whether he's really that much different than a lot of coaches would want to be. He certainly has a track record, but I think it helps him. Just his reputation in this sense is very beneficial in landing really good high level high school recruits. And obviously he's been successful in developing players too, which, goes a lot more farther than anything else.
I mean, even you can call it reputation, but it's also just, it's facts.
Well,
you lay
sure.
it out and you say, there's the proof. You look at Michigan State last year, the team that started in the Elite 8 against Auburn, every one of those guys was somebody that was recruited by Michigan State and brought in as a freshman. All
Mhm.
of them,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I
Well,
say at the
it
end of
just
the year
shows that they
because
can.
there were a few games Frankie Fiddler started early on, but
Right.
the
Yeah.
point remains, it's it's a pro. This is going to be a shocker to people, but coaches lie in recruiting, and they do. And every freshman who commits to a high major program, guaranteed, is being told, "Yep, you're going to have a great shot." Particularly high level guys, like top 100 guys, you're going to have a chance to compete for major minutes, major role, start, all that. They're all being told that, you
Yeah.
know. But some places that doesn't happen, and that's why you see the number of people transferring. It's because there was some type of disconnect between what they were promised and what happened. Usually that's the
Yeah.
case.
Sure. That's
And
usually, yeah.
it whatever, I'm not even necessarily I mean, I guess I am blaming those coaches, but you can say you could say, well, they ought to be sticking to their word, but these guys have families and they've got jobs to consider. And I get it that the motivation is clearly there. Hey, if I don't think this guy who was a freshman is likely to be the answer for me as a sophomore the way I need him to be in order to win enough, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to grab a guy or two in the portal who can do that job, right? I get it. But that's not Michigan State. Michigan State doesn't recruit over guys really. They just don't. And so when you're talking to these guys, all of whom everybody Michigan State's recruiting has great options in front of them, that matters. It has to matter.
So anyway, so all I was saying is that for Tom Izzo, he maintains a relationship with the players throughout the year. You always hear him talking about this. He's having meetings with them because, I mean, you can tell people whatever you want, like to your point. I mean, you can lie to them, or you can tell them, "Hey, you have a chance," and you can really mean it, and with maybe not expecting them
Right.
to actually have a chance. And it's got to be hard. You're expecting to play. You were the star wherever you were before, and now you're you know 10th, 11th guy on the bench. It's hard, and you got to practice. The
Yeah.
scout team. That's not what you expected. And you hear about stories about Draymond Green where he had moments where he would have left and was just really upset that he wasn't playing as much as he wanted to. And so you have to trust the process, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I think you have to be good at that relationship, which is I think why Izzo, when we talk about what makes a good coach right now, retention is part of that, right? And I think he does a good job with that. It's part of the culture, obviously built in, but anyway, I think that is a key to him.
He
And he
said it.
probably says,
He said it.
he
Yeah, he said it yesterday. He had a
yeah,
press conference yesterday. He reiterated. He said this before. He said, "My portal begins in my locker room,"
yep,
by which he's talking about retention.
yeah. I mean, from a financial standpoint, it's obviously less expensive to retain someone than to find a new person. I mean, anyone know who's in any sort of business, it's expensive to go recruit, whatever it might be. And free agents in the market tend to be more expensive. And
Right.
especially when you have someone,
Generally
I know quantity, they fit. There's a reason you're there because you liked how they mesh with with your system, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I mean, that is obviously what they're looking for. So before we go, why don't you go through? You mentioned some other targets, people coming in. I mean, as you mentioned, Carlos Medlock he's already committed. So although he's coming for his official visit, uh, I think this weekend in a couple
this
days.
weekend. This
Yeah, and so
weekend.
he's
Yeah.
bringing his buddy, who's clearly he's turned into the Jeremy Fears of this class. Now he's going to be the recruiting, the one trying to bring in recruits just as much as probably Jeremy did when he was recruiting 2 years ago, trying to bring in Xavier Booker and Cone Carr and those guys.
Yeah. So several guys still um, on the list of possibilities, and I, you don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I would say the fact that they've gotten Medlock and Avent already is a big positive. I mean that ensures that you've had at the very least a solid recruiting class. So it's
Right. If it just
basically
stopped now, right? Yeah, it'll be good.
yeah, right, but they're not done. I'm pretty sure they're
Right.
not done. So we'll start with a guy we've mentioned already in this, Josiah Jervis. Big time scoring guard. I mean, just wired to score, 6'5" wing, from New York. He's someone who Julius Avent, they didn't play AAU together. They played on different teams, but reportedly they know each other. They're friendly. Makes sense being from the same general neck of the woods. Uh, that recruitment for a long time has been reportedly uh, Michigan State and NC State.
Mhm.
And I have there's a guy, and we've probably mentioned him before, this anonymous account, Trilly Donovan, who has his own Discord channel. He's still on Twitter a little bit, but most of the action's on Discord. Um, he's a figure in college basketball. I think most people assume he's a media member, not sure who. I've seen different theories on that, but generally gets good recruiting information in general, and then especially when decisions are imminent. And in fact, he was the guy who really kind of confirmed the Julius Avent rumors that were starting to build. He has said, I believe earlier this week, or might have even been the end of last week, that his general sense from people he's talked to is Michigan State leads with Josiah Jervis narrowly over NC State. Um, there's also reportedly schools like Tennessee and Florida that have really been trying to get into that recruitment. But I think the sense is it's been Michigan State and NC State. And,
Mhm.
look, I, I'm not under the impression that NC State is throwing around bags. So I don't think there's a danger of that. We'll get into that element with regard to another player in a minute. Um, but so I think the sense I have is it really is, Tom Izzo versus Will Wade. And I mean, come on,
I like those odds.
come the
Just-
F on. I mean, yeah, Will Wade's cute, but Jesus Christ, what are we talking about? So, in any event, the thing with Josiah Jervis is that Josiah Jervis, uh, the way Michigan State sets up for next year, if he's the player I think everybody believes him to be as a scoring wing, there would seem to be a golden opportunity to step into a major role more or less immediately, because you anticipate Trey Fort is gone at
Yep.
one wing, whether he's starting or a key reserve. Either way, that's a guy playing major minutes who's not going to be there most likely.
Right.
And then you've got Cohen Carr, who I think everybody believes there's a possibility he's not going to be there, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
So this isn't just simply, look, this is the program that's best for your long-term development and you want to win and all of that. There's all of that, but there's also a distinct, as opposed to some of these other guys, like I don't know that it's as clear cut for Carlos Medlock next year to get like major minutes.
Right.
He made a
Yeah.
decision based, I think, on a lot of factors beyond just that. Even Julius Avent, it might be a little more complicated for him. But Jarvis, it's right there, it would seem. And so I'm gonna be he's the guy who was screaming in the photos with Izzo, which
Yeah.
I've never seen before.
No, I haven't
Michigan
seen. Yeah.
Michigan State has worked that recruitment. That's the one, and they work them all hard, but that's the one that you've gotten the sense that's the Shannon Brown, Gary Harris. You hear about these recruitments over time where the player or their coaches at the high school or AAU level talk about how it seemed like every time I looked up, Tom Izzo was standing there. That's been Josiah Jervis and Julius
Yeah.
Avent too. They've tended to visit both when they're out there, but they have worked Josiah Jervis relentlessly. And it's uh it's been it's been impressive. So I think, you feel reasonably confident in that one. I think if you're Michigan State, that's the word. So that's one. Then there's Maximo Adams. And that's a really interesting one that'll refresh people's memory. Maximo Adams is generally considered to be a top 30 guy nationally now. Similar in size, maybe a little bit more of a perimeter skill set right now than Avent, but another guy who conceivably could play the 3 or the 4. Big time player, had an unbelievable EYBL season as a scorer and a rebounder. He's one of the top rebounders in the AAU, on the AAU circuit, and he was a very effective scorer, and he shot 40% plus from 3, if I remember correctly, even though he's kind of seen as a physical guy.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, he's the real thing. And again, I think you could play him at the 3, you could play him at the 4, and you'd be fine, like right away. So he's a California guy, Southern California, and it's interesting. He had all blue bloods in that recruitment. I mean, Duke, Kansas, I think Carolina was in there, Kentucky, everybody. But the way it seems to be shaping up, and again, we're not getting great quality information, because he's a Southern California guy.
Yeah.
But
it's Big Ten country. We should know.
It appears, right. It appears that Michigan State is in great shape there as well. He's already taken his visit. Again, the visits always go well, right? But apparently that one went really, really well. They love him. And that's one that I think in the beginning, because Michigan State got involved kind of late in that recruitment, and then you looked at everybody else that he was going to visit, and you just thought, well, you look at things historically, kid from Southern California, blah, 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 probably not one you expect MSU to win. I think there's and again, this is another one, going back to Trilly Donovan, he said the information is not great. So even national guys aren't getting like tons of people talking. But if he had to make a guess, and this was as of a few days ago, he'd guess Michigan State leads. So you get Jervis and Max Adams to these two guys they've already got in the fold. That is a dynamite class on its own. Dynamite. And I think that, I don't know what I would label the percentage chances is. It's kind of foolish to do that, but I think there's a real chance that happens. I don't look at it as any kind of, Hail Mary kind of thing. So there are those.
Taylor,
What's that?
Yeah. I was going to say Taylor. You're going to get to him.
Well, we'll get to him. So then there are 3 big men that are still on the board. Right. One is Tristan Reed, the brother of Terrace Reed. We've talked about him. 6'8", like 240-ish, but can move a lot like his brother. Good around the rim, definitely not a stretch 5 guy. And MSU has really liked him and really tried with him. And it seemed like even scheduling the visit was sort of an afterthought. Missouri was seen as the longtime leader, but he visited Missouri. He didn't commit. He visited Michigan State. And what I had heard is that Michigan State felt a lot better about its chances after that visit. Now, I still don't think he's going to end up at Michigan State, but it's interesting that they're still in it and they made it a race. And he would fit what Tom Izzo likes from his 5.
Just so we thought his brother too. Terry.
Absolutely. I'm not going to compare him, using someone like Xavier Tillman is a tall order because to match for any player. But I think you know what I mean. Like a guy 6'8", 6'9", but he can hang with bigger guys, and yet he's got the mobility to do all the things that Tom Izzo wants from a 5 in terms of being able to defend out on the floor, being able to switch, all the footwork, all of that stuff. So certainly if Tristan Reed decided he wanted to commit, they'd gladly take him. And interestingly, he's also going to be a teammate of Carlos Medlock's this winter at Link Academy. They didn't visit together.
Who's not playing there?
The guy who they got a lot of guys. The guy who is visiting with Carlos Medlock this weekend is Ethan Taylor, whom we mentioned earlier, 7-footer from Missouri, and for a long time, or from Kansas, I'm sorry, and for a long time the presumption was he would be a Kansas Jayhawk,
Sure.
but
Naturally,
Kansas,
yeah.
I believe, is set to get a commitment from a kid named Akins this afternoon, if it hasn't already happened when we're recording this, who's a big man. And the belief was, well, they prioritized that guy over Ethan Taylor.
They still have
So,
another 3 years with Hunter Dickinson, don't they?
right. Yeah. It seems to have settled, from what I've seen, down to Indiana versus Michigan State.
Hmm.
Michigan State's really made an impression. They've really come hard. And of course, now, he doesn't have a pre-existing relationship with Carlos Medlock that I know of, but they are going to be playing together. They're going to be visiting this weekend together, so it
Right.
can't hurt to have your point guard also coming here. It can't be a negative. The interesting thing with Taylor is the rumor supposedly is that Oregon has come in with a major financial offer, one that Michigan State and Indiana both would be highly unlikely to match.
Even Indiana? Wow.
Well, Indiana is down. Here's the thing with House, because nobody really knows what's going on. It's squashed the NIL stuff. The NIL stuff that we were hearing last summer, that is done. That is over right now. You are not hearing any of that talk because nobody knows what's legal. And I now, do I think that eventually there's probably going to be a workaround in some fashion that's going to start, or people are just going to start ignoring it? Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
not to get derailed. Do you mean when you say legal, you mean actual legal, like law
Well,
versus
no,
just
I
against the
don't.
rules, or
I
do you mean
don't.
just
I mean, I'm using that as a euphemism. You're right.
okay? All right. Okay.
It's regulation. Well, check that. Not really, because it is a court order that has led to this. So there would be a
Yeah. Then
question about that when you use that
yeah,
term.
may not
But
want to
there's
deny
this
that.
NIL clearinghouse thing run by Deloitte. And so that's, anyway, that's got people sort of gun shy. But with Taylor, the word also is he doesn't want to go to Oregon. So what does that mean? Will he have people? And I have not heard specifics as to how much money but is on the table versus what he would be likely to see in revenue share from Michigan State or Indiana. But there must be a substantial difference for it to be out there as being discussed like this. So I think that's one to watch. I think that was another one, kind of like Max Adams, when Michigan State first offered. My response to these is always, okay, let's see if they get a visit. And then they got a visit scheduled with them. Okay, well, now it's real. But you look at
Yeah.
some of the players involved and you think, Kansas, for a Kansas kid, you think, well, probably. And, Kansas done a pretty good job with big men. So they can argue that as well. But the longer it goes, the more it looks like Michigan State has a shot. I don't know what level of shot, but they're in it. So that's one to monitor as well. There's a third guy who got offered more recently still, named Max Myers, who's a Canadian player, believe is scheduled on the back end of October. If they don't get a commitment from these first two guys, that's when that comes into play. And he's considered a good prospect, but more of a developmental guy. So like you had mentioned earlier, what might Michigan State do if Jesse McCullough plays well this season and they land a guy who out of high school who's ready to play immediately? Might that mean they don't go into the portal at all for a big? I don't think Max Meyer would be that kind of player from what I
Mhm.
gather. I haven't seen him obviously other than clips, but he looks interesting. There's some perimeter skill. He's also got decent size already, so it wouldn't quite be like a Carson Cooper situation where you're worried about, was he going to have enough bulk to play immediately? But
Right.
yet at the same time, there's a feeling that, yeah, probably a year of development before you'd really expect him to burst out would be likely. But again, I think he comes into play if they miss on Taylor and Reed. So we'll see. Another similar situation, although he's had an offer for a little longer, is Jaden Collingwood, who's a 6'6" forward, explosive athlete, really explosive. Maybe not quite Cohen Carr, but
Who is?
could step in and give you another high turbocharged athlete. Little rawer than some of the other guys they're looking at. And they've got him coming in, I believe, in the back end of this month or middle of this month as well, as we're recording this on October 1st. Again, the sense there is, and what's interesting is that there's been a feeling he's from the DMV, and the feeling was he loves Michigan State, but also really like Maryland. Well, he's dropped Maryland.
Really?
So there are other schools involved, but the general feeling I have is if Michigan State misses on Max Adams and Josiah Jervis, I don't know, it could be an and or an or, that's when Collingwood comes into play. If they get both of those guys, he's not coming to Michigan State. So with both of those last two guys I mentioned, figure that's an and or kind of deal. And
do you know how it works with these commitments? Like, for instance, they've made all of these offers.
Yeah.
If he's like, I really want to go to Michigan State, I know there's a chance they're going to take these other two guys. Is he in communication, or can he just say, "Hey, I'm going to commit right now," and then force the Michigan State staff to make a decision?
Well,
I mean, I don't know how that normally works.
Sometimes guys try that. Draymond Green tried that with Michigan State. I think when he was a sophomore.
Because once you're offered, aren't you offered? I mean, I would think it'd be kind of weird for them.
It was reported by some people that he had committed, and then that had to be walked back because Michigan State wasn't going to accept the commitment just yet. And he ended up committing to Kentucky under Tubby Smith, and the only reason they got another shot at him was Tubby left.
Yeah,
so
right.
Thank God that happened. but yeah, that's how it works. And yes, there's communication. There's a reason that those two visits are scheduled when they are.
Sure.
That they're coming.
You would say probably by the first week of November, we may be done with all these. Is there a pretty reasonable chance that it's
possible?
The class is possible. When was last year? I know there were only two. I feel like it was.
You just don't
before the season started.
The funny thing is that it's harder than ever, in my opinion, to really know what the timeline is for these guys. Some of these guys, like Julius Avent, people thought at least he's going to take the visit to Seton Hall, and then probably he's going to commit. Well, here we are. Maximo Adams, haven't heard a thing in terms of I know he's got additional visits scheduled, I believe, but does he take them all? Don't know. Yeah. Ethan Taylor, does this wrap it up this weekend and then he looks to make a decision? I don't know. Reed has seemingly taken all the major visits that he would take. When does he make a decision? You would think it starts to happen. What's interesting about it is there are not a ton of high-level guys that are committed just yet. And it's funny. I think it cuts a couple different ways. If you're talking about an elite guy, like a top 10 guy, those guys might well start to take their time and maybe into the season or even into the spring because they want to see what NIL looks like. They want to see what portal activity looks like. But if you're in the back half of the top 50 and below, to me, it seems you want to grab a spot while it's there.
Yeah.
Now, you may end up, depending upon where you go, you may end up pissed off if you commit somebody in October and then in April they go recruit over you, like UConn did with Darius Adams, or lots of examples of this.
Sure, yeah.
But again, it gets back to what we were talking about at Michigan State. I think there's a high level of trust that whatever Tom Izzo's telling you it's likely to look like is what it's going to look like. Like that. That's it, man. And I think that's there's resonance to that. Certainly in this recruiting cycle, that appears to be the case. It's great. It's just great to see because, I think back to other coaches who were at this same stage of their careers, guys like Jim Boeheim,
would be one of the more recent ones to come to mind. And these guys got negatively recruited because people were constantly in the kids' ears saying, well, is he going to be there? And I think sometimes those guys end up not working as hard. But you look at the way Tom Izzo has approached this recruiting season, and it's, if anything, there's even more ferocity to it, and he's made it very clear he isn't going anywhere. So I think that that's all helping. And we could really be on the verge of one of the better class. Now, one caveat to all this, I should mention, it is generally understood that this class nationally is one of the weaker ones in recent years. So, what does that mean? I will say this, all the guys I've seen on tape, on video, the Michigan State is recruiting look legitimate to me. But the feeling is there's not a lot of superstar power.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think, none of the guys that Michigan State are recruiting are guys that I would expect to come in and be immediate superstars. Like even Maximo Adams and Ethan Taylor are probably the two highest ranked. I don't know that I would go into the season thinking those guys are likely one and dones. They're not necessarily that kind of, but every guy they're recruiting looks really good. Looks like they could be a very good player at Michigan State. And if you get 4 or 5 of them, well, that's at that level, that's a hell of a class.
Good. Yeah.
You got a great, you've rebuilt your core, and then you can fill in a hole here or there from the portal if you feel you need to, which is the world where Izzo wants to be operating.
Yeah.
So it's all really, really encouraging.
Well, I think we'll leave it there, and we'll resume our regular scheduled programming with the Big Ten previews as we approach the beginning of the season, which is only 3 weeks away. Well, if you count the exhibition game, I think it's the 23rd. So we're about 22 days from that. I'm actually going to go to Midnight Madness. I've never been there before. So I'm going to go this Friday, see what it's like. We'll see if there's any interesting shenanigans that go on there.
Well, you're lucky that you're going this year, because I saw Izzo yesterday, and it seems to me that it's really on his mind to actually move this thing back to midnight soon.
Oh, yes.
Mentioned it a couple times.
No, wait a minute. Are you implying that I couldn't be up at midnight, that I would
fall
asleep?
I'm saying it's
an
easy.
old guy.
I'm talking about a drive to Grand Rapids after all that nonsense. You're not home until 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that's true. I have no idea where I'm parking or anything. I don't know.
Looking out for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right. Well,
if you're only going down to Trowbridge Road, okay, no big deal. But
yeah, it's rolling back in the dorm.
You got to drive.
Yeah, I know. I work and all that kind of stuff too. Although I'm not working Saturday. I don't work Saturdays anymore. It's kind of nice. All right. Well, so until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.